I imagine the plan to tax private schools, to put VAT on private fees, will become one of the big issues over the next few weeks. And not simply because of those 650,000 children who are currently educated in the 1,300 independent schools, 7% of all British school-aged children, and 18% of children over the age of 16. But it's because of the implications of this. Now, I have to put my cards on the table. I was educated in 2 private schools, but for most of that time, I was in receipt of a bursary, a scholarship, which meant my parents were not paying fees. I was a charity case, really. So I think, from my point of view, I exemplify the best of what the private school system can do if it puts its mind to it. And I'm very grateful for the education I received. And there were plenty of things wrong with my school, with both my schools. The first school was extremely brutal, and the second school was rather dismissive of my options, but and streamed me in the wrong classes and various other bizarre things. But it did teach me how to fend for myself, and my family were not very hands-on when it came to my education. Did I receive any advantages over the advantages I would have had in a state system? I would probably have gone to the local grammar school, which still existed in the area where I was brought up. So I think probably the advantages were in terms of this idea of being independent. I don't think the advantages were particularly academic. I still think that a grammar school education is probably superior to many of the private school educations that are on offer even today. And certainly when I met students from grammar schools at university, I was overawed by their skills, by their competence, by their knowledge, by their methodology, which hadn't been taught to me. I had 3 particularly fine teachers, all very different, and I acquired another particularly fine teacher while I was at university, one of my tutors, a fellow called Bishop Callistos. And when I teach myself, I have a mixture of these 4 teachers in mind almost all the time, one of whom was horrible. One of whom was this sort of leprechaun called Galway, who was vicious and vacillated a great deal. One never knew whether he was in a good mood or a bad mood. We lived in fear. And corporal punishment was a matter of routine. He was somebody who reduced me to tears on a number of occasions in public. I find that unforgivable, really, in a teacher. I think that's something that should never be done, and that's not the role of a teacher. But he was exceptional in what he did as a teacher. He gave me a grounding in Latin and Greek, oddly, because towards the end of our time he also taught Greek, and for that I'm very grateful, and I've never forgotten those lessons. He taught me how to use my memory, and it's something that I think we don't teach today. We teach students to understand why they're doing something rather than to simply do it. And simply doing it without question is a discipline which is worth learning. Now, Richard Tice of Reform wants to challenge the Rachel Reeves tax hike, her VAT on schools, he's been told by various individuals, particularly Dan Needle of the Tax Policy Associates, that his plans to challenge Labour in the courts will fail because of his success in leaving the European Union, because of Brexit. His challenge, however, I think goes beyond the idea of human rights. And his challenge is about the nature of the discrimination in the policy. And he says all charities, any form or of any form, get business rates relief. To target only independent schools on business rates relief and VAT on fees is deeply discriminatory. To make private schools alone subject to VAT, and not, for example, to charge VAT on universities, is a discrimination. And I think he's absolutely right. But what he's not right on is about overturning tax legislation. That can really only be done by the EU. The EU is no longer there. The European Court of Human Rights, the Human Rights Act, can challenge these things, but Richard Tice, of course, wants to abolish the ECHR. If Labour intend to impose a £100 billion tax on everyone, called Richard Tice, says Dan Needle, I'm pretty certain it would be against the ECHR, but he'd still have zero chance of obtaining an injunction to stop it. In the real world, there's a complete list of all the UK tax rules that have been found to be contrary to the ECHR HRA. Nothing. And Mr. Tice said, Dan Needle is a Labour man, so of course he would say that. He's wrong. The HRA overrides everything. And I think both of them are at fault. There is discrimination in the Labour policy, and I don't think it's going to be destroyed by legal challenges. I think it will be destroyed by the closure of the smaller private schools and the sudden rush of students back into the state system, which the state system cannot afford to accommodate. So rather than making a 1.6 billion saving, I think it's more likely that the closure of private schools, the exodus from private schools by students, will cost the state sector significantly more than 1.6 billion pounds, and that is where the failure lies. I think there are charges which can be applied to parents sending their children to private schools, but I think this isn't the way to do it. And parents sending their children to private schools, please remember, are already paying tax for state schools, which they're not using. So, and in addition, private schools, the better private schools, are already offering significant bursaries, access to their equipment and playing fields, and that is the area that probably should be extended. And we should be using the expertise from private schools, the better things that private schools do, to fortify the state system. Most importantly, the state system needs to be freed from Ofcom. Ofcom needs to act as an advisor, not as some sort of certifying organisation. There's a union of which I'm a member called Equity, which has much the same attitude as Ofcom. It acts as a gatekeeper and also as a helper. It shouldn't be doing both things, nor should Ofcom. There should be a second organisation if we want to have a gatekeeper for education, and if we want to be promoting some sort of rankings of schools. That should not be the job of the organisation which is going around trying to improve education and educational standards. That should be a private discussion between schools and the education departments and local councils and the school governing bodies. That's the way it should move forward. Should parents have a say in this? Yes, they should, through the school governing body. If we cannot have confidence and place our trust in the schools, then we cannot possibly improve our schooling. And now, having started this by saying that I was very lucky and had a bursary to go to private schools, I should also point out that I've taught in private schools and in state schools, not only in this country, but elsewhere. I've also taught, I think now, at every single level, both in primary school, secondary school, and university, not only in this country, but abroad. So I think I'm in quite a good position to be able to make an informed decision. I've also taught teachers how to teach. And I think there's a lot of good practice in the British system, which indeed I've promoted. But I think there's a lot of mess, and there's more mess that has occurred in the last 10 years than I've seen ever before. And certainly going into schools more recently, the amount of paperwork and the pointless bureaucracy, which gives a lot of airs and graces to some of the higher admin staff in a school, does not help the education of the students. And we need to find better ways. And I think COVID gave us some direction with the integration of technology, the use of screens, and complete lessons screened to classrooms. I think we need to stop thinking that the classroom teacher is the ultimate authority when it comes to information gathering. The classroom teacher should be pointing to different resources. One resource might be a computer screen on which the school might buy in courses on a particular subject, and even marking systems that are more centralized. If we're going to have centralized exams, then we should have significantly more access to centralized lessons and lesson plans. They can be stopped and modified by teachers. But I think that our teacher training and the experiential nature of so much teaching has dissolved into a process of giving students handouts which are pointless. They're simply filed away and not looked at and not worked through. We need to develop the skills of memory. We need to develop the skills of note-taking. We need to develop the skills of research. And what's extraordinary, I find, about students is when you give them the mission to research something on the internet, they will do it, and they will do it better than the teacher. They have resources, they have information, and together with access to libraries, even online libraries, the teacher's role is to inspire and to moderate. I don't think the teacher's role is primarily anymore to inform. That role has been usurped by the internet.